Now let's take a look at Terraform variables. Terraform variables. Now, what's a variable? A variable is any attribute that changes. Let's take, for example, a resource like an EC2 instance. If you have an EC2 instance, an EC2 instance can have a variable Amazon machine image, a variable instance type, a variable instance security group, a variable tag, and so on. So all these attributes that change are what we call variables. For example, we might have in a given environment, we are using an Amazon Linux AMI. In another environment, we are using an Ubuntu AMI. In another image, we are using a Windows AMI. So all these different AMIs that we use are changing and they are all variable. Now, in another case, we might have a T2.micro instance or a T2 medium or a T2 large and so on. All of these are variables. Now, once you're creating a resource, the EC2 here is a resource. Once you're creating a resource in Terraform and you want to be able to manipulate these attributes in the resource, you specify these attributes in what we call variables. So Terraform variables enable you to be able to change configuration attributes with respect to new requirements. So in your environment, assuming you created your EC2 instance first with a T2.micro instance, you can specify the instance type as a variable such that the moment you want to change from T2.micro to T2 large, you can change that in the variables file. So variables help you to do that. Now let's go to our VS Code to see how variables work. So we are back here in our Terraform folder. We create a new folder. We call it 3 variables. We are starting with the default variables. Now, for us to do the variables, we are going to create new files. So the first file which we see have our provider.terraform file, which we created from the previous module. We have our main.terraform file, which we created from the previous module. And then we are now creating a variable.terraform file. Now, let's go back to our folder 2 and we open the provider.terraform and we copy every information. We copy the information in provider.terraform. We come into folder 3 that we just created. We open provider.terraform and then we paste. We go back into folder 2. We open the main.terraform. We copy all the content in the main.terraform and then you come into folder 3 and you paste in the main.terraform. Now, like I mentioned in the earlier explanation, the AMI here is a variable. That means you can change the AMI ID at any given time. The instance type here is a variable, meaning that you can change the tag at any given time. Now, for you to make use of variables, you create a variable. So we are going to create variables. So you type variable. And now, what is the name of the variable that you want to create? You want to create a variable for the AMI ID. Now, as far as variables are concerned, you are going to see that each variable will have a description. What is this variable for? So this variable is for the AMI ID. Now, as far as variables are concerned, you must specify the type of the variable. You must specify the type of the variable. We'll see the type as we progress in the course. Now, for variable type, there are different types. You can have a string. There are different variable types which you will see as far as variables are concerned. So as far as type is concerned, we can have the type string, we can have bool, we can have list, and so on. We can have string, you can have lists, you can have bool for a boolean. A list is maybe if you want to declare, if you want to specify something like security group that has many values, you use the list type. If you want to declare a variable that can be true or false, you use the bool type. So these are all different variables. But if you want to pass the variable as a string, you use the word string. String is just any variable that is one word. Now you must give a default value for the variable. In our case, what's the default value of the AMI? One that every time you want to create a resource using this variable, your default value should be the AMI which we created above. If you do not want to have a default value, you allow the space empty. Now with this, we have created the first variable AMI ID. Now the next variable that we have here is the instance type. So we have to create a variable for the instance type. So we come back here, we create a variable. The variable name is instance type, and then now we also give the description, and we say this variable is for the instance used. Once you specify the variable, this variable is for the instance used. The type of this variable equally is a string because it can be one word. The default value we have here is, we are saying that every time you want to create this EC2 instance, the default we should use is a T2 micro, and then we have the variable for instance type complete. The last variable that we have is the variable tax, or we can call it EC2 tag. Now the description specify this variable specifies the name of the instance. Now what's the type? The type of this variable equally is a string, and then the default we have for this variable is the name of the EC2 instance, and our default here is a test instance. Test instance. Now, once you create your variables, we have the variable AMI ID, we have the variable instance type, and we have the variable EC2, and we have the variable EC2 tag. The moment you create these variables, you now come to your main resource block and you replace all these values, because you want now to reference these values with the variables which you created. So for you to replace this value with the variable which you created, you do that using the var. You type var, and then now it automatically brings up all the variables you have in your environment. So we want to replace the AMI instance ID, so we choose the var.ami instance ID. For us to replace the instance type, we do the same thing. We do the var dot instance type. You replace the instance type that we have, and the same thing for us to replace the tag, we use the var.instance tag. So you now see our resource now is more orderly, where we have our instance AMI ID specified as a variable, our instance type specified as a variable, and our instance tag specified as a variable. You can do Terraform init here just to be sure your configuration is complete. So you come to terminal, new terminal, and then you do Terraform init. It shows that we are not in this directory. So for us to go there, we do an ls, we cd now into the three variables folder, and then we ls. You now see we have a main.terraform provider and variable.terraform. So let's do a Terraform init here. So when Terraform initializes, you can now go ahead to do your Terraform plan, and you see you can go ahead to do a Terraform plan. You now see we have one resource to add, 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. So if you do Terraform apply, it's going to create this resource making use of the variables. Now once you created your variables in your main.terraform, remember we said the main.terraform is for you to specify just the resources. We said the main.terraform is just for you to specify your resources. For you to make the variables belong to a file that contains only variables, you copy all these variables that you created, you copy all the variables, you get all these variables that we created, and you come to the variable.terraform file and you paste. Ideally, your variables should be created in the variable.terraform file, but for demonstration purpose, We created the variables first in the main.terraform file, and then we copy all those variables into our variable.terraform file. So now with this, you now see we have a variable AMI ID in our variable.terraform file. We have a variable instance type in our variable.terraform file, and we have a variable EC2 tag. So all these variables are variables that are being used in our main.terraform file. And we must remember that these variables are all supposed to be in the same folder. So all these variables are in the default variable file. So summarily, we are creating a resource AWS instance, test instance, making use of variables, the AMI ID, which is a variable, the instance type, which is a variable, and the EC2 tag, which is a variable. And all these variables are specified in a variables.terraform file. So let's proceed with other variable use cases.